have you ever been in a place where you have been in flow? Things have just worked out really well. You've been in the zone and you were able to make so much progress, gain so much momentum towards achieving success, and you want to be able to recreate that pretty much on demand. That's what we're going to be talking about today as we continue to go through this book, The Laws of Success, and take the time tested principles from over 100 years of research. We're going to bring it into today's language, taking all of the things that we've learned since then, proving that these principles are actually the way that you need to go in order to be able to create success. Today, we're going to be going through Napoleon Hill's lesson on enthusiasm. Now, enthusiasm is a really interesting idea because we often think that enthusiasm is the way that we show up. Can we be enthusiastic about something? Can we show the energy that we want to bring into our life, and we have the confidence and we know where we're going, and all of the previous lessons that we've talked about that have led us here? But enthusiasm is so much more than that. And I want to show you how to create enthusiasm for what it is that you're doing. Now, when we take the word enthusiasm and we look at where it came from, we take it back all the way to the root. It's rooted in Greek, the word theos. When we take this word and we look at the etymology of it, having God within. And so when we know that we have enthusiasm is tapping into the God within, enthusiasm actually is translated to divine inspiration. And so when we have enthusiasm for something, it is more than just a belief in yourself, like, I know I can do this. The positive affirmations and working on your mindset, all of those things are good and critical and important to help you get to that point of success. But that is not what enthusiasm is. Enthusiasm is more about getting out of the way and allowing God to work within you, which is why when you get into flow, like, time seems to collapse. 5 hours can pass and it'll feel like 20 minutes. You will be able to get more work done, more progress towards the things that you're trying to create when you have this enthusiasm, because you know how to get out of the way and allow God to work within you. Now, the interesting thing is neuroscience supports this as well. We talk a lot about when you are in a space of anxiety or depression, or you are really struggling with that self-confidence, how we work more on the reptilian brain. We work in the back in this survival mode. You're highly irrational, you're extremely emotional, and the goal is to get you to move to the prefrontal cortex. We've talked about this. When we activate the prefrontal cortex, that allows us to make critical decisions, to think things through logically. But neuroscience, we look at the research that has been done in the last 70 years around flow. When someone steps into a state of flow, or maybe you call it being in the zone, or maybe it all comes down to just being really focused, what happens on a neurological level is that prefrontal cortex actually shuts off. You don't and you no longer have the ability to think critically, to make decisions, because you just allow things to move. And what happens is your brain activates something that's called the central executive network. And what this does is it helps you bring focus and attention to the task at hand, and it engages with the things that are going on around you. So when this central executive network is activated, it allows you to be able to step into the state where decisions aren't really even decisions. Things just kind of come and you're able to just keep moving forward because you're in this state of flow. Now, a lot of this research that we have done has come from an incredible story that happened back in the 1950s. So we're going to go through and we need to talk about a man named Roger Bannister. Now, Roger Bannister was a runner for England, and he ran in the Olympics, in the 1950 Olympics, and he came into fourth place. He ran a mile was his race, and he ran it in 4 minutes and 25 seconds, I believe. And so fourth place, he was really, really discouraged. He was frustrated. He decided that maybe he needed to give up running and just go back to school and figure out what he wanted to do. And so he had a little bit of time to figure out what it is that he wanted to do. And in all of this, he decided if he was going to try his hand at running again, that he needed a specific goal, something to really push him to be better than he was before. And so he decided that he was going to run a 4 minute mile. Now, at this time in the 1950s, scientists and the medical world all agreed that running a 4 minute mile was not possible. There was just no way that our physical bodies could do that. They believed that your heart would literally explode if you attempted to run a 4 minute mile. They had gotten close, but no one was able to break that record. And Roger Bannister decided that he was going to run a 4 minute mile. And everyone thought that he was crazy. He had very little support from people around him because they were worried about what it would do to his physical body if he attempted to run a 4 minute mile. And so Roger decided this is what I'm going to do. If I'm going to run and try to compete in the next Olympics, then I'm going to run a 4 minute mile. And so because he was so discouraged, he had taken some time off of running and decided, I'm going to work up to this. And so he started running quarter miles, and he would run a quarter mile in 61 seconds. And that wasn't enough. He wasn't satisfied with that. And so he kept at this cycle for the first couple of days. He would run at the hardest that he could go and calculate that time. And then he would take a couple of days off, and then he would get back to running again. And once he was able to run the quarter mile at less than a minute, he knew that it was possible for him, that he could reach that. So he worked and worked in this pattern of working and taking time off and working and taking time off until he got to the Olympics in 1954. And he ran and he ran and he ran. And that first mile, he ran at 58 seconds. The second quarter mile, he was a little bit over 2 minutes. By the 3 minute mark, he was on track to reach his goal. And in 1954, Roger Bannister ran 3 minutes and 59 seconds, breaking the world record and shattering every mindset of both the medical and the science world, believing that it wasn't possible. Roger Bannister set a record not only for running, but what the human body is actually capable of doing. This is called now the Bannister effect because of what Roger was able to do. Roger wasn't able to run a 4 minute mile because he believed in himself. He was able to run a sub mile because he got out of the way and allowed what was given to him inside to just take over. And he just pushed and pushed and he put in the work to get there, but he got into a state of flow. And that's what allowed him to be able to reach this goal. And so the fascinating thing is once Roger proved that it was possible, that your heart wouldn't explode, and he proved the science world and the medical world wrong. 6 weeks later, there was someone else who broke the record and ran it in 3 minutes and 58 seconds. Within the next 6 months, that record was broken 5 or 6 times because it now was proven that it is possible. Something that once was believed was impossible, now all of a sudden became possible for not only Roger, but for so many other people who were right on the edge of that. It became possible for other people. That's what it means to get into flow. You can take things that once were impossible and move them into something that is now possible. And so we want to know if you want to create these kind of results in your life, If you want to take something that is seemingly impossible and make it possible so that you can reach success, the principle comes down to this: we need to get into flow. There has been so much research done in the last 70 years about how to get into flow, and it comes down to three things that I want to go through with you today. The three things that you need in order to step into flow. There are three triggers, as they call them, that helps you get into flow. First is an internal trigger. You have to have things happen on the inside. Roger believed that he could run a mile in under 4 minutes. He knew that he could do that. He just needed to put in the work and he needed to learn how to get out of the way. These are our internal triggers. All right. So, first, we need to have autonomy. You need to have the freedom to be able to step into what it is that you believe is good for you. You need to have the freedom to explore the things that excite you. There's a reason that our very, very first law of success that we talked about was having a desired outcome. If you haven't watched that, I invite you to go back and watch that because it is the foundation of everything that we do. If you know what it is that you want to create and you have this autonomy, the ability to create it, then it allows us to step into this place where we're working towards flow. Another thing on an internal side is to have complete concentration. Now, there's a lot of research that has gone into what does complete concentration look like. And that is removing distractions. It means that you're not multitasking between all of the different things, but you're really focused on what it is you're doing, the task at hand, and allowing yourself time to be able to do that. Now, recent research has showed us that you have anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes where you can really focus in on something particular and have that time be compressed into just a blink of an eye. If you're really in the state of flow, you can expand that longer, but working towards getting into flow when you know that you have time and you're not going to have to be distracted in 20 minutes or 30 minutes. Having the ability to focus in on what is most important. Everything comes down to what is it that you are focused on. That's an internal trigger. Those are things that we can always control. Next is understanding your purpose. Does the task that you have at hand, does it have meaning? Is there something deeper inside you that is pulling you, or is this just a checklist? If you're just working through checklists of that has to be done and that has to be done and that has to be done, you're less likely to step into flow because there's not meaning behind it. If you can understand what's the meaning in this, what is the purpose that I have in this task, and what is it helping me to be able to do? Once we associate the purpose and the meaning behind that, it's so much easier for you to get into flow because there's reason behind it. And so you don't have to go through and be like, well, this task is stupid. It's not going to benefit anybody. But there is a deeper meaning behind that. One of the most critical things is to have immediate feedback. If you're working on something and you're not going to get feedback for 3, 4, 5 months, it's really hard to get into the state of flow because there's a disconnection. When we have immediate feedback, it helps us to be able to step into, okay, now I can do this, and now I can do this, and that was working and that's not working. But getting that immediate feedback is helping you be able to get into flow because you know things are working and you gain the momentum that you're looking for. The last thing that I'll say about an internal trigger is there is a ratio that we need to work on that is balance between how challenging the task is and the skills at hand. You want to be in a space of growth. Flow only happens when we step into this state of growth. When something is a little bit harder, if you go back to our story with Roger Bannister, this had never been done before. No one had ever even thought that it was possible to run a 4-minute mile. And so the task at hand, the challenge was high, but so was his skill level. He knew that he had the ability to do it. And so it was just putting in the time to help get him to that point. And then getting that self out of the way. When we think about the prefrontal cortex and we think about all the things that we run through in our mind, and we think about all of our limitations, and we think about what's possible and what someone else says is possible for you. When we take all of that and turn that prefrontal cortex off and just say, I'm doing the task at hand, I'm super focused in on it, I know that it is possible. We bring that enthusiasm to what it is that we're doing. And then all of a sudden, that balance between the skill and the challenge allows us to be able to move forward, to step into that state of growth and help us get to where we need to be. So these are the internal triggers. But we also have external triggers. If we can look at the things that are happening around us, sometimes that'll also get to a point that'll help us get in alignment with our internal triggers. So external triggers are things like something that's novel, something that is new, or maybe unexpected. When things are novel, your brain is more likely to focus on them. And so if you get into just repetitive tasks, we're doing the mundane, things are going to have a much harder time moving forward. They're going to have a much harder time gaining that momentum because it's no longer new and exciting. So this is why it's so important. And we talked about this last week when we talked about creating balance. How can we take old ideas and turn them into something new? And that is what novelty does. When we take an old idea and create something new, it helps us create this novelty so that it's easier for us to be able to focus on. As entrepreneurs, this is something that we do all the time. We take the same process and we throw a new idea on it. We take something that has been time tested and we bring it in a new way. This creates novelty, which is an external trigger. It's going to help you get into the state of flow. Next is taking risk. If we don't ever take risk, we don't ever face that uncertainty, then we're not going to step into the place where flow happens. Risk is actually something that helps put you into the state of flow because we're having to work through things. We're having to work through what about this and what about that and different approaches and ideas. And that requires taking risk. When you can take that risk, it helps us to be able to step into that place where flow can now happen. It also requires a little bit of complexity. Oftentimes, we think we just want life to be a little bit easier. We want life to just come, and we think flow is about sitting back and allowing things to come into our life. But that's actually not the state of flow. That's more of a state of laziness. Flow requires complexity. Flow requires you to learn mastery. Flow requires that growth if you want to be able to achieve something that was once impossible. And so when we step into this state of flow, we allow the risk and the complexity and also an unpredictability. So all of these kind of flow in together. But when something is unpredictable, it makes us step into a place where we can adapt. Now, all of these external triggers are oftentimes things that we try to avoid. We think, well, if I can just make everything predictable and I know what's coming and I set up a perfect routine and I have the perfect schedule and I know exactly what my steps are to get from where I want to be to where I want to go and I got everything laid out, then I can achieve success. But that's actually not what it demands. Flow requires you to take this risk. It requires things to be complex. It requires you to be adaptive because things are unpredictable. And it's actually a place where you need to be. So we need to stop running from those things because that is the zone where growth is actually happening. And you are allowed to step into this place of flow. Now, the last trigger that we're going to go through is all about creativity. If we can bring creativity into this space, that's going to put us in the state of flow. You can have internal triggers, you can have external triggers, but until we bring in this creativity, we actually don't ever reach that state where your brain is literally stepping into a place where things are just flowing. Creativity is all about pattern recognition. If we can take things that are unfamiliar and find the familiar in them, that is what's going to put you into flow. Having a clear direction, but an uncertain path. That is the difference. That's the key. A clear direction. You know where you're going, but how you're getting there, you don't know. When you know where you're going, but you don't know how you're getting there, and you allow that enthusiasm, I know that I can do this, but I'm actually not going to do it. I'm going to activate the God within to help me get to that point. That is the point of enthusiasm. That is why flow works the way that it does, because we bring this enthusiasm. We know we can do it, but we turn over the how to God and allow that to work in our lives. We take the steps forward. We're focused on the task. We know what it is that we want to do, but we take that enthusiasm and allow things to work the way that they are meant to work. This also helps if you have something like Roger Bannister did, that you're going to prove someone wrong. Because Roger was out to set that the medical world and the science world were both wrong. He knew that his heart wasn't going to explode if he pushed just a little bit more. He knew that it was possible for him, and he set out to prove them wrong. And because of that, he allowed him to step into this state of flow. You have to give yourself permission to explore strategies a little bit differently, to look at the process of how have I been doing things and what do I need to do differently to help me get to the level of success that I'm wanting to create. And it comes down to this enthusiasm. Enthusiasm only happens when you're able to step into flow because you know what you are capable of doing. We are capable of doing so much more than you realize, but we don't step into this state of flow. We don't allow God to work in our lives, to take the specific action that you need to focus in on where is it that you want to go? What is it that you want to create? Allow that confidence to come inside you because it doesn't come from you, it comes from this enthusiasm. When you create this enthusiasm for life, that is what allows you to step into flow and create the success that you have been looking for.